Hello, welcome back. I'm John and this is Secure Tech with JK. Final video. Yes, this is the final video on my series on MCP security. I want to start with something that should be unsettling. There is no famous name bridge for this MCP 08 because for this video, the OWASP top 10 that is wired up under this video is MCP 08 and MCP 10. MCP 08 is simply lack of audit and telemetry. Then an MCP 10 is context injection and oversharing. And if you look at it here, there is no story around MCP 08. And the reason why there is no story is because it was never recorded. And the job of the MCP 8 is to do the recording. So if it's not enabled, if it's not functional, then there is no story. Okay. So, and for MCP 10, the Asana MCP server story, is wired up and demonstrated here. So let me take it further, and I think we'll follow it together. So there is no famous named bridge for MCP 08 because it was never recorded. Every other risk in this series has a named attached to it. Postmark, Replit, Invariant Labs, MCP Inspector, Obsidian, Asana. Each one is documented, disclosed, and wired up. MCP 08 lack of audit and telemetry has no named incident. And the reason is not that attack did not happen. The reason is that without logging, nobody could see them happening. Most MCP deployment in 2025 had effectively zero audit logging. That shows that people implement MCP server without logging mechanism in place, which means every attack from lab 1 through 4 that I've done, which is the fifth one, shadow server discovery, for example, scope escalation, the other one, tool poisoning, command ejection, intent flow subversion, supply chain compromise, could have executed in those environments and nobody will ever know. So if you're wondering where those things are coming from, I have done a series of video on how scope escalation, it can be achieved and how you can mitigate against it, in MCP environment, shadow server discovery, tool poisoning, and all sorts of that. So the story of MCP 08 is the absence of story. So because there's nobody to write that story, right? So MCP 10 has a story and it is instructive precisely because no attacker was involved. Asana launched the MCP server on May 1st, 2025. The logic bug was present from day one. Server-side state was not strictly partitioned per tenant. A shared object assumed it knew which user a session belongs to instead of proving it on every request. Under certain conditions, one customer's project names, task descriptions, comments, upload files, and strategic documents appear in a completely different customer session. Approximately 1,000 customers affected, including Fortune 500 companies. Server offline for nearly 2 weeks. Yeah. And the part I want to hold on to, a CI test running on every build, would have caught this before launch. It was not caught because the test was never written. That's to tell you that there was no CI test that was written to test this kind of integration. Okay, so today we are writing that test. So I am John and this is the final video. So let's just finish this MCP security series. Okay, so let me be precise about why I call this. Okay, let me back up a bit. And so the first session here is MCP 08, lack of audit and telemetry. So let me be precise about why I call this the detection layer rather than just another risk category. Every other control in this series, vault migration, JIT token, schema pinning, localhost binding, is unverifiable without telemetry. You cannot confirm a control is working if you have no record of agent behavior to check against. You cannot dictate a bridge you cannot see. You cannot reconstruct an attack chain you can never record it. MCP 08 is not one risk beside the other. It is the infrastructure underneath all of them that shows that for you to be able to prove that all other MCPs are working, your measures and fixes are working, that shows there must be MCP 0 facility or infrastructure in place. So in this, what do you need to look out for? 4 feeds. That is the minimum viable logging requirement for any MCP deployment. That shows that when you are deploying MCP environment or MCP server, you must ensure that 1, the identity is logged. What does that mean? It means that this is the minimum viable logging requirement for any MCP deployment. Number 1, identity. Who called? not which service, which specific agent, which user, which session. That is the identity you have to log. Then number 2, you have to log the tool. What tool was invoked? Then number 3, parameter. What argument were passed? Masking for sensitive values. We do not want the login system to become a new credentials store. Then the 4th one you log is timestamp. When did this happen? When did this happen? So 4 feed on every tool call. 4 feed on every tool call give you everything you need to know to reconstruct any incident in this series. Who called what, with what argument, and when. Without those 4 feeds, an attacker can operate in your environment for weeks, pulling records in small batches through legitimate tool calls, and the investigation starts when a customer calls you. That shows that you are not in control because you don't have visibility. So let's go to MCP 10, context injection and oversharing. So MCP 10 is a pure data boundary failure. No attacker required for the most common form of it. The precise distinction that matters. Assume isolation is not enforced as isolation. When you design a system on a whiteboard, you draw boxes. This tenant's data here, that tenant's data here, that tenant's data there. The boxes look separate, but if the code does not enforce that separation on every request, if it assumes it knows whose session that is, instead of proving it, then under certain conditions, the boxes connect. That is what happened at Asana, a shared singleton. The code assumes session to user mapping instead of validating it. Another certain condition is the most dangerous phase in software security because a sometimes bug passes your test, it passes your demo. It works fine in the staging. It leaks in the production when the timing lines up. And if it only fails sometimes, it can fail for 2 weeks before anyone notices. Okay, so the fix is structural, hard namespace isolation, enforced by infrastructure, not by code discipline. And a CI test that proves tenant A data cannot appear in tenant B session, running on every single build forever. The test does not need lock to catch sometimes bug. It just needs repetition. So now that we have the thesis, the theory, the story around these two MCPs. Now, what I would like to do is to move forward and show us how we can simulate a server without, logging or telemetry, and how we can fix that, and another server with such, and what we stand to benefit. Then I will go further and I will show us how to make sure that we have appropriate tests in place to ensure that tenant A session will not suddenly appear in tenant B, workspace. So that is what I will do. So let's get to the hands-on session. So the first server I want to create is a server without a login capability. I think by now you should be familiar with my Node.js servers that I'm using for these classes. Just for me to just spin up something that we can use to demonstrate that. So I will call up this server. So it seems that the server is up. Oh, sorry, the server is up. And what do I need to do now that I have a server that I can show that, okay, it's not logging the event that is going on there. So let me make a call command. So you can see, because in my server, I have some customers, that I had coded. And what I say is that it called that endpoint and give me the first 3 ones. So I have Alice, I have Alice Smith, I have Alice Smith too. We have Alice Smith, Bob Jones, and Carol. And Carol White. Okay, so let me make another call. So you can see I am making a call that file should be exported. You can see now, say tools exported to params all through JQ. So you can see now I'm exporting file to a particular location. That shows that if an attack can be going on, maybe somebody is exfiltrating data from the environment, and that is a typical example of that. Then the other one here I want to simulate is so there. So the other one I want to get here is sending an email. You can see I send an email to an attacker email address, and all those kind of things. So all these things are going on a server, and we don't have an idea that they are going on because we don't know when it happens and we don't have visibility into them. So that is the point I'm trying to make here, that an attacker can do all these things. Let me do this. Let me say something very little here. You don't see anything. Okay, now let me keep running this. You see investigation. Okay. You see there, what do the log shows? Echo, attacker just exfiltrated customer data what does this log show? So let me show you something here. I'm just trying to point to you that if we don't have access to the log, it says no log exists, right? Investigation is impossible. I'm only emphasizing that by echoing this thing to us that, okay, if we don't have log, if we don't have telemetry being captured, there is no way we can know what is going on in our environment, right? So now, if that is the case, let me do something here. So if you look at it here, this is the server I created, GS server, but if you look at the log, there is nothing on our other log here. So let me move it forward. And so that is how to simulate an environment that is running an MCP server without a logging mechanism. So even if customer information is being exfiltrated out of that environment, you don't know what is going on. So that is a classic problem there. Then the next thing I want to do here is to simulate the broken tenant. I'm not fixing this yet. After simulating the second MCP, then I will come to the fixing and the remediation. So this for create a broken context store. So let me simulate that. One sec. Okay, we're good. This is for MCP. So we have a server here. Let me try to power up the server. Okay, so now I have a server here that says simulating Asana cross-tenant leak. Tenant A, Acme Corp, storing confidential roadmap. The tenant B, Rival Incorporation, reading current project. So data leak, tenant B received tenant A data. So if you look at it, look at the information here, the project name, the project launch date, the member of the team, look at them here, and the status is confidential. But unfortunately, you can see tenant B now knows, tenant B has the information because the boundaries between individual tenancy and workspaces were not validated, were not tested and proven. So now let's go to, so now that I've shown how this happens, then let's go to the fix of MCP 08 and MCP 10. Okay, so a fix. So let's look at the logging. So let me look at this. Okay, so we have now I am creating MCP server that has logging capability. So let me make the first call like I made the last one. So to the server, and let me make the second call the same call. I think I have double. Okay, that one went through, and let me make another call here. Okay, so now that I make those calls, I have some the first thing I want us to look at is, let's look at the log file. So okay, so when the server, the logging server, the server that I created that's supposed to log all its activities for the fix of the server that was created without having a login activity. So the first call I make to it, you see that it logged it, telling me that, okay, it's logged. The timestamp is here. The name of the agent that is doing that. I told you that you must have like four things you have to log about MCP server, at least minimum of 4, the timestamp, the identity, the parameter, and I think one other thing. So if you look at it here, and the tool, you can see this is the tool, this is the read customer data, the action that happens, the parameter, and some other information. So I want to make another call. Let's look at the login we have from this. You can see it logs too. It says that this particular agent make an export, and it says successful status, and then let me do another call. So it sends an email. The same thing I did in the previous lab. The only thing is that this new server has a login capability. So for instance, if I now do this, so it says access denied. Let me see if I can use my sudo to get that. Okay, so I think something was missing in that command, so it shouldn't be. So cat, I'm trying to cat that location. So if you look at it, you can see that log is now here. So when I cat that, because I asked the MCP server to log its information on log location, log directory called tool call JSON1. So if you look at it now, these are the things that happen. You can see the timestamp, you can see the name of the agent, you can see the export, everything that it outputted to the screen are logged in a separate location. And the good thing is that this kind of thing, if you want to export it to maybe, Prometheus or Grafana or Langfuse, you can export those log file to, a more like a SIM tools, like a SIM toolings. So that is that. And yeah, let me key this server so that we can move to the next one, because I think not killing the server kind of mess up things. So now let's go for the tenant isolation fix. So let me clear this. So what do we do here? I want to create, because we created a server that was not safe, where tenant A can see the data that belongs to tenant B, but now I want to create a more safer, well proven and validated server. Then we'll be able to see that. So this is my server file, and I'm going to just run this. So that is the server for for tenant isolation. So the next thing I want to do is to run it. So if you look at it, it says that tenant isolation test is passed. Tenant A cannot read it. Tenant A can read its own data, which is the right thing to do. Tenant B cannot read tenant A's roadmap. That is good. Now that is taken care of. In the previous demonstration I made, it was not the same. Tenant B can read tenant A's information. Now tenant B cannot read tenant A's API key. Tenant A cannot read tenant B's. Tenant B cannot read tenant A API keys. Tenant B cannot write its own data. Tenant B can write its own data without affecting tenant A, an anonymous access through an error. So these are the let me say hardening put in place to make sure that tenant isolation is embedded within the MCP server. And that is that. So you can see that on this case, the issue of not well scoped sessions or tenant sessions not well scoped is gone. Now, the other thing I want to say here is the ability to put. I just want to show us this. It's not something. It's being able to embed this kind of test within our CI environment. Like GitHub Action. So you can see here that what I say is that it should run the tenant isolation test, right? And I have a test server that it will run that it does that. So this is like for every CI test, this kind of run through and help you to check if things are going on well or not. So that is the end of the walkthrough. The only thing I want to say here is that let me add this structured logging. Under structured logging, 4 feet per core. Every attack chain from lab 1 to 4, even before this lab 5, is now reconstructible after the fact, because now we now have a logging MCP server. So that shows that whatever you read in the logs, which will show you when tools and some other identity you can use to reconstruct that particular attack. Then number 2 things to note is the PII masking before logging. So login system does not ensure that login system does not become a new sensitive data store. Mask it out. Every sensitive data should be masked out before being sent to the log. Then the other one is hard namespace isolation per tenant. In the case of MCP 010, customers cannot read another customer's data regardless of key name. So that is that. Then tenant isolation test in CI. So catches the Asana pattern on every build before it reaches production. So if you have the CI test in place that test for tenant isolation, then during the build, this will be tested and you don't have to get worried about that. So the one thing to remember from lab 5 is without telemetry, every other control is unverifiable. Without tenant isolation test in CI, assumed boundaries fail silently. The absence of a famous MCP 08 incident is not evidence that nothing went wrong. It's an evidence that nobody could see it because it was not recorded, because the guy itself was not implemented. So this is what I want to say here. And on this note, I come to the end of this series, MCP security. And it's 6 videos. 5 of them are labs. So if you want to see how you can get your foot in the door, then what can I do next morning? Now that I have this information, what can I get to do in my environment at work? Within your workload. Then what you need to do is to pick this, run through them, pick down some of the knowledge, what you can run, how you can adapt it to your environment, and begin to discover MCPs in your environment, begin to see whether they are doing logging, or begin to see whether they are tested for isolation, or begin to see their JIT tokens and some other things that we've learned throughout this series. And once again, my name is John, and I want to thank you for joining me for this series, and I will see you in the next one.